we're going to come to our panel discussion, Driving Change and Unlocking Career Development Through Standards. So please join me in welcoming our panel moderator, Georgia Kavanagh, BSI's Policy Manager for London Declaration, to the stage. Welcome, Georgia.
So, welcome everyone. To kick things off, let's just start with some introductions. So if you could each briefly introduce yourselves and your areas of expertise. Ruth, let's start with you.
Hi, lovely to see you all. Thanks so much for being here. Really excited to chat today. I'm Ruth. I work at Mutual Value Labs, which means I'm a consultant working with big businesses, trying to help them identify the problems of people and planet that they can solve. And I don't mean just in a kind of mitigate their negative impact. I mean, how can they innovate their business model to solve a specific problem that they're really well set up to solve and make profit from doing so. So it's a bit of a different take on what you might imagine a traditional sustainability approach would be. I always wanted to work in sustainability ever since I can remember, but I studied creative writing at university, so when I left, I obviously got rejected from every single sustainability role I applied for. And I knew that I wanted to do something with a difference, but I wasn't a scientist at all. So I went off and I did fundraising in the charity sector, which I loved, but I was so frustrated constantly that our ability to solve the problems that we could see in the world was so limited by our ability to kind of sell the problem to someone who had to give money kind of generously. And I really believed there was a better way of doing it, but I didn't know how to kind of get my way in there. And kind of like Grace was saying, I put myself out there in the role that I was in, and I would go to meetings I wasn't invited to, and I would speak up on sustainability. I was learning on the side, I was fundraising, and then I was learning about sustainability, kind of upskill myself. And I ended up getting this message one day from my chief finance officer who said, "Have you got 5 minutes to come up to my office?" And I went up, and obviously I had 5 minutes, and he said, "Do you want a role in sustainability? We're gonna create you one because you've been outspoken in enough meetings now that we know that that's what you want to do." And so I had this amazing opportunity, and it was super lucky, and that really just started me out on the ability to like learn as I went, gain a load of knowledge as the job unfolded in front of me, and take every opportunity from there. And now I'm super privileged to be working with some really big businesses who are trying really hard to make a big difference and to try and innovate the world of business away from just being profit making, but also solving the problems that we need to solve. So thank you for having me, and lovely to be here.
Amazing, thanks. Melvin, on to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Melvin. A little bit about me. So I'm the founder of the National Youth Technology Council, which is the UK's first youth-led tech for good platform, all about young people, not just campaigning and complaining about the challenges in technology, but actually building the solutions to them. We realize that technology is very fast-paced and policy is very slow. So to bridge that gap, why not build the solutions first and then push for policy second? And that's sort of our mantra and our mission in terms of how we actually create change here in the UK. It really stemmed from a place of, we do a lot here in the UK across sort of social, economic challenges that young people face in terms of whether young people sit on boards or can actually physically campaign for changes, whether it's in health, mental health, education, or any other social policy areas. But tech was that one gap that was missing in terms of why aren't young people shaping it? It affects us every day, but why aren't we sitting on the table here in the UK? And everywhere else in the world was moving and not here. So we're sort of early on in our journey, and this all stemmed from my sort of background in social impact work. I'm also a Churchill Fellow, so my research is all about global best practice for, I have it written here, global best practice for equitable digital and emerging technology infrastructure. Essentially, it's about traveling the world to pick out all the best bits from what countries are really doing well in terms of how they're building equitable systems for young people, bringing that back here into the UK, and how that influences the decisions and how we structure the NYTC and other sort of frameworks across the UK and across the world. And I'll say my final fellowship is I'm an ITU Youth Fellow, and I'm on their program all about developing digital development projects, and they're supporting the NYTC with how we actually implement some of our internal systems. But I would say my overall mission is, how do we actually build tech for good? And how do you make sure that it's developed responsibly? And how do you make sure that young people not just have a seat at the table, but actually build and actually empower the infrastructure around it? Thank you.
On to Abbey.
Hi everyone, my name is Abbey Dorian. I'm the token BSI person on the panel. I am the energy sector lead at BSI. So I sit atop our technical committees that do all of the hard work in terms of our standards development. and I set and direct our strategic direction for energy sector portfolio, whether that's our formal standards or some of our strategic interventions and programs. And I also have that fun job of trying to articulate the technical content in our standards in a way that actually makes sense for policymakers and broader industry. So very happy to be joined by amazing panellists today.
Thanks everyone. It'll be great to hear more about obviously all of the impactful work you're doing throughout this session. So Ruth, if we just stick with you for a minute. So this evening we've been talking a lot about standards as an opportunity for young voices to help shape and influence decision making, which is something you're of course doing through your role at Mutual Value Labs. So could you tell us a bit more about your personal experience of being involved in standards as a YP and how this has impacted your career? And building on that, do you have any advice for other young people who are thinking about getting involved in standards?
I have to confess, I never imagined I would get involved in standards, even though I always wanted to work in sustainability and build a fairer future. I hadn't imagined that this would be a direction that I would go in. And it all kicked off, I was sat in a teepee on a little wooden stool under the pouring rain in the Cornish countryside. If anyone's ever been to the Eden Project, there's a conference there every year, and I was there. It's a sustainability conference. And I heard this speaker start talking about the way the world is and why the world has kind of ended up where we are, and why there are so many problems that are so difficult to solve, and how we are not necessarily organizing our economies and our businesses and our organizations towards solving those problems. And my eyes lit up and I sat up straighter and I ignored the rain, and I thought, this makes so much sense. This explains why a lot of the problems that I can see and that I'm trying to tackle are happening. And she was talking about PAS 808, which is the world's first standard in purpose-driven organizations. She was the technical author, Dr. Victoria Hirth, and she explained what the standard included. And I'm not going to lie to you, if I hadn't had the technical author explain to me what the standard included, I would not have been able to understand the standard necessarily at the first read. And it was like a November day, and I went away and I spent my Christmas holidays. Makes me sound really sad. I promise I had fun too. But I read the standard like 4 times. And I came away in January and I took it back to my work at the time, and I was like, guys, this tells us how organizations can reorganize in order to solve these problems. And it doesn't tell us like exactly how, because that's obviously we all need to figure out and go on our own journey, but it tells us like the guiding principles and the worldviews, and it like helps articulate and create a shared language. And that's the thing that I'd always been missing, was this like really shared clarity of why we are where we are and what we might all need to think about in order to make a shift. So I think that for me is the beauty of a standard, is that it is a shared language. There's a shared like clarity over the direction of travel that we're going in. PAS 808 isn't a certification, so you can't be PAS 808 stamped. And actually the work's now going on, so I'm in the Mirror Committee for the UK to take it to ISO, so it'll be an international standard, or there'll be an iteration of PAS 808 that's an international standard. And you won't be able to like be certified. It's a management guide, so it means that any leader, anyone can pick it up and they can use it to start a conversation, or they can use it to change the way that they work, which is super, super exciting. And it just basically gives us a clarity over direction of travel, an ability to ask leaders for something clear that will allow us to work towards a better future. And I just think there's kind of nothing more exciting than working on that. And yeah, sometimes it means reading some really detailed technical documents and figuring it out and like persevering with it. But that's the work that's got to be done to get us in the direction we want to go. And so that's why I'm deeply committed and very excited to be talking about standards.
I think that definitely speaks to the point that Abbey was making about translating the technical content of standards into a language that everyone can understand. I think hearing from you about the importance of standards in that context, I think, is very helpful to kind of translate that to the masses. Do you have any advice for kind of young people who might be interested in getting involved like you? Yeah,
I mean, there's obviously standards across a whole load of things. So basically, what are you passionate about? What do you care about making a change for? PAS 808 is like a really overarching standard, so it kind of covers, it's why I'm being kind of, it covers like the future and the world being fairer. So have a look if you're passionate about that. But if you're specifically passionate about like workplace, fairness, specific issues, there will probably be a standard that will support a workplace to navigate towards that, or an organization to navigate towards that. And let me tell you, your workplace and your employer is going to be interested in you being able to bring some level of like clarity and helping them navigate that journey. I know it can be like quite daunting to try and take on a standard, especially a certification standard, because it requires the work to actually prove that you're doing something across all of these elements. But it's also a massively beneficial competitive advantage. So if you can bring that to your organization and they can certify, it can help you sell more work, it can help you prove in your direction of travel, your strategy is what you say it's going to be, which is massively beneficial. So I would say, think about what you're passionate about, have a look to see what kind of standards there are in the area, and then see how you can get involved, whether you can take it to your organization or support the development of future standards, which is also a very cool place to take it.
Yeah, as you say, BSI alone has thousands of standards, so whatever you're looking for, I'm sure there'll be a standard for you to get involved in. So now coming to you, Melvin, I think that kind of connects us nicely to your work around getting young people involved in creating positive change in the digital space. And I know obviously digital equity is really central to your work to ensure that innovation benefits us all. So what role do you see standards playing in making emerging technologies more inclusive? And importantly, how can we make sure young people's voices in particular aren't just heard, but actively lead the way in shaping responsible technology and policy?
Cool. I'll be honest. I struggled with this question to sort of keep it condensed, like an answer to actually provide you with something of value. Like as in, I was sitting there even crossing out, adding things. But I think there's 3 key things. But I think to answer both in a way that can actually give you something, I think we have to strip it back to sort of the basics, because I feel like the tech sector doesn't really understand the basics of this sort of thing. So I think when we talk about equity in tech, it's not just about the voices, but the structure. I think we all understand that young people's voices, I don't want to repeat that same sort of narrative, because we all understand that, but I think it's about who designs the systems, who benefits from them, who bears the risk when things go wrong, and who has the power to decide what good looks like in the first place. And I think the 3 things that I eventually came up with, I think one of the first ones was standards shouldn't just protect, they should redistribute power. I think it's going a bit further from, okay, cool, we need to have things around AI and online safety and all this sort of stuff. I think it's honestly more than that, and I think it's about how we quantify the impact of young people. So I think the issue that we have across all sectors when it comes to youth involvement and youth voice is that almost all institutions say that they engage with young people, but no one can prove if it's actually made an impact. As in, I've been in so many consultations, but there's never been a thing where I've left after, saying, okay, cool, my input had X results on whatever we was consulting on. So I think it needs to, if inclusion cannot be measured, it's not inclusion, it's just a PR stunt. And I think a lot of us can understand, we've all been in rooms where that is the case. So I think forward-thinking infrastructure across standards and across technology, it needs to have youth impact metrics that are very clear, generational risk assessments, intergenerational distribution metrics, and audit trails showing where youth decisions making actually impacts technology. So that's the first one. The second one, let's see where I wrote this. We need standards. We need standards for participation itself. I think you touched on this point around the accessibility. Accessibility is a huge part, and this is what I mean. We need to sort of strip back a lot. So if we talk about inclusion, it's about the process of participation. A lot of the time in this space, a lot of young people are doing things for free, very London-centric. I'm not from London, so everything normally is London-centric, jargon-heavy. I think, I'll be honest, if you go through some of the standards, some of the language, it's boring. It's not really engaging for young people. And I'll be honest, I'll probably put it into ChatGPT to summarize it for me. Like, I think that's just the reality of it. So I think if we really want to engage with young people, we need to meet them where they're at and their understanding. I'm not saying that young people are dumb, but it's about understanding that long text isn't what we want. Do you know what would be great? Like TikTok, short form content of like standards, honestly. But I think it's about, if you really want to engage, especially, I think a lot of people in this room are probably 18 plus, I'm hoping, or 21, or however old. But I think if you want to get to a younger demographic who can actually have autonomy over the systems that are shaping them, you really need to make it in a way that's actually very engaging for them. And I think my last point, and I think this is probably the most important one, because I gave you 2 top-down solutions. I think in this space of how we build equitable solutions is thinking bottom up. So I think the biggest challenge that I face with my organization is funding. And this comes under the title of investing in young people. I think young people understand the challenges, and I think in the tech space and the organizations that are trying to help young people, it's still from the lens of we're doing this for young people, not with young people. I think with the platform like I'm in with the NYTC, it's about young people having the power to actually build the solutions. Like, funding's always going to be a challenge, but until we sort of redistribute that power to a point where young people can actually have the money to build the solutions, I think from my experience, through doing other things in the past and working with other young people who've been funded to develop other social impact projects, I think we've seen better solutions and more tangible impacts because the power has been given to people who've actually had the lived experience. I don't think a CEO or executive at a big tech company can really understand the challenges of the effects of what their technology has done to young people. So I think it's about, okay, cool, if you really want to see that difference, the tech sector really needs to learn from the wider social impact sector in how, by giving young people money, it's fundamentally money, they can actually build some of the best solutions you'll see, and then we can actually have a conversation around co-production and what that looks like. But I think I think a quote that I always like to leave with an audience when I'm talking about tech, I always say, the future of technology isn't just about what we build, it's about who gets to build it. So do you want to be a barrier or do you want to be part of the solution? Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks. I feel like, yeah, round of applause. Wow. I love that you came with some very specific, tangible next steps for people to take forward. So maybe Stephen can get on the TikTok idea for our standards at BSI. Amazing. So yeah, Abbey, obviously Melvin has touched on kind of standards accelerating inclusivity, specifically in the technology sector. So we kind of know, we've been talking a lot today about how standards are a unique and often underutilised driver for positive change in all industries. So turning to your area of expertise in energy, obviously, can you share a bit more about how energy standards and some of BSI's kind of broader sustainability initiatives are addressing the issues that matter most to young people today, and any specific examples?
For sure, I can try. It's a big question. I'm not a spokesperson for all young people, but if I was to think about the kinds of things that me and my friends care about, we're definitely very focused on climate change, concerns around sustainability, concerns around diversity and inclusion, concerns around environmental harm, all of these kinds of things in terms of maintaining a future that we're proud of are the kinds of characteristics that I think are common in this room, I hope. And it's definitely being reflected not only in the energy sector in the UK, but in the character of our standards portfolio and where we want to be going in terms of ensuring that the right standards are available at the right time for the right people. I hate to say it. So when I'm thinking about how our standards are reflecting those central focus areas, obviously the London Declaration looks explicitly at holding us accountable to taking into climate science for the future of formal standards, and also making sure that the most underrepresented and at-risk groups are actively engaged through the process of standards development. But we're seeing the emergence of, I hate to say socio-technical, but it's a fancy way of saying that standards used to think about technical feasibility, performance, are they economical, and are they safe? Now standards and our standards committees and the direction of travel is more and more thinking about not only the technical feasibility and the performance and the safety, but also the social ramifications. So there's greater considerations of who's being affected, who benefits, who needs to be in the room, and greater expectations around consultation, stakeholder engagement. What are the social ramifications of this potential technological or technical solution? And so we're seeing, an inbuilt of circular thinking for things like wind turbines, really thinking about what happens to these assets when they are no longer performing as they need to be. But one particular case study that comes to mind that we are particularly proud of, in May of this year, our energy regulator, Ofgem, published a piece of documentation or guidance around the ethical use of AI in the energy sector, and that explicitly calls out specific standards that iron out what can be very broad and ambitious objectives around what ethics mean for the energy sector as they implement and deploy digital technologies and AI technologies, and specifically fleshes out standards that actually give requirements and specifications for industry about what accountability looks like, what governance looks like, what non-bias looks like, what safe deployment of these AI technologies is, and particularly safety critical systems like nuclear energy. We definitely want to make sure that there's a standardised approach there. And so that's a really good example of a recognition that standards are definitely part of the piece of making sure that not only the transition to clean power is technically feasible and we get the performance that we need, but those kinds of topics and considerations that are really important to us around fairness, justice, equity and inclusion are also equally prioritised as we move to net zero.
I think it's very telling that a lot of the same kind of themes and words have been coming up across what all of you are saying, you know, kind of ethics, inclusivity, and kind of the digital innovations that we're kind of looking ahead to see. So I think it's interesting to have this conversation, kind of bringing it all together and seeing how standards kind of sit across all of those different areas. Brings us to our final question before we move into some time for audience Q&A. So I thought it would be nice to end on a sort of call to action for the audience today. So panellists, could you each give us kind of one small mindset change or daily action you would encourage everyone to adopt to start creating real-world impact? Ruth, start with you.
I think mine is be intentional and proactive. So don't just accept what your job is today. Look for what you want to shape and go after it. Ask the question, because if you don't ask, you won't ever know how far you are away from getting it. And even if the answer is no, you can't have that today, you can always then say, what do I need to do? What do I need to demonstrate? How do I need to prove to you that I can take on this responsibility or work in this space? And then the answer to that will help you work out what you want to develop. So be intentional and proactive to go get what you want.
Yes. Melvin?
I think for me, advice I would give or a call to action, I would say collaborate. I think collaborating is a huge part of how we create change. I think a movement isn't just one person, it's a mass amount of people. And don't wait for the opportunity to come to you. I think I've operated in a mindset, if the opportunity is not there, create the door for it yourself. And then all the other opportunities will then start coming towards you. But I think it's about having that mindset of creating your own opportunities. So yeah, take action and create your own opportunities.
Abbey?
I think if I told myself 10 years ago that I was going to be the energy sector lead at the national standards body, I'd be like, nah, you got the wrong person. So I think the one thing that I would really implore you to do is think about the areas that you're curious about and how you can leverage your skills for those particular opportunities. I'm not an engineer by trade. I very much rely on the technical experts in our committees to make things make sense. And so there's always an opportunity for you to use your skill set to add value to any industry or organisation. So really trust yourself. If you have an area that you're curious in, really do pursue it.
Amazing. Thanks for those, everyone. That kind of concludes our discussion. So before we end, we'll just take some time for audience questions. So we've got some BSI colleagues who will be handling the mic. So if anyone wants to raise their hand if you have a question for our panellists. We might start, could we start towards the middle here? And we'll kind of come forward. Got one right in the middle in white. Let's see there. Yeah, there you go.
Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. I suppose it's a couple of questions, but they're related. And I am a proponent of standards. I'm not moaning for the sake of moaning, but standards can also be used to take away autonomy from younger staff or earlier career staff. And I have had an experience of policy managers who have very openly admitted they have no idea what they're really talking about. But because they are now the policy manager, they are the gatekeeper. And they say no, because computer says no. And that's it. It's the end of the discussion, even though they're not you can't argue against it, because they say, well, the standard says this. Best practice is only practice, and that's the end of the conversation. You can't make a case about why it doesn't apply. I've had a lot of issues of CE mark and UKCA, where they want to apply domestic standards to one-off scientific equipment. And they go, no, you can't do that. And then that's it. It's the end of the conversation. We're not allowed to say anything back. We get in trouble if we return. So when you're making standards, do you consider that there are people out there who will gatekeep using these standards, and how to make it very clear to them that this is not the only way forwards? This is the suggestion. There's actually reasonable. You can have a justified reason not to. And on the flip side, if you are, when you experience someone who is a policy king or queen and they want to own it and the computer says no and they don't care, what do you do then?
Sorry, what was the question?
So there's sort of two. One is when you're making standards, do you consider how they can be used negatively? They can be used to take away autonomy from the earlier staff, because someone who, a policy manager, they might have no knowledge of the application field, but they'll say, well, I read this standard, so I know what I'm talking about, and I'm saying no, and that's it. It's the end of the conversation. You can't stake your case because it's written there. It's best practice, and it's best practice or no practice. And
So
you just cut down.
So in the development of standards, do we think about the potential negative
Yeah.
consequences and kind of take up? Perhaps that's one for you. No, I will say none of us are standards development managers here, but perhaps take a stab.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the question. I think there's probably a few elements to it. The first is around stifling innovation. Our standards focus on outcomes-based goals for that exact reason. We don't want to stifle innovation, whether that's in a product, a process, or a service. And it's a shame to hear that there are some gatekeepers in the real world. But our standards are very much written in a way that is meant to be fostering new ways of achieving the same outcome. So unless we're saying, you want to do X, Y, Z, we want X, Y, Z outcomes. The other point that I would probably challenge any gatekeepers in the real world around this is the standard and computer says no, is that our standards, at least the formal standards that we say with a capital S, are voluntary in nature. They're meant to be an enabling factor or a mechanism to make things easier. They're not made mandatory unless they're called up in legislation or a contract, but I won't get into that boring stuff. They're meant to be a lever for industry or standards users to reach their outcomes with greater ease and greater certainty that they're doing it aligned to best practice. That being said, in many cases where it's self-regulation, so you're taking it up on a voluntary basis, there are other ways to do it. And if you find another way to do it, let us know so that we can update that standard so that it's more applicable for real life use cases. And then the third element around that is, do we consider sort of the negative implications of applying that standard, or where it might have some unintended ring fences for industries or users like yourself, which is sad to hear. Yes, so we have a really firm commitment in terms of the principles of standards development around balance and it being industry-led. And so all of our committees or our advisory groups, working groups, if it's another sort of strategic intervention, are really focused on making sure that we're a accurate representation of broader industry. So that's not only like the big players, like our regulators and our trade associations, but we're having more of a more active effort in attracting young people, in attracting diverse audiences and small and medium enterprises as well. So I would say if you're having direct challenges with a particular suite of standards, absolutely get involved in the committee so that that standard is providing even perhaps express language to say this is a way of doing things, not necessarily the golden rule.
Thanks. Any other questions? Should we
I got the mic here.
take one further towards back there? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I got the mic again. I think, first of all, thank you all for your insights. I think it's very, very inspirational. So my question would be and I think it tags along on what you've been discussing. We want to attract young talent into businesses, but what kind of incentives can get business to attract young professionals that want to be involved in standard development?
So is the question, what can businesses do to attract young people to get involved in standards development?
Correct, yeah.
I think that might be another one for... Well, does anyone want to answer that question?
Grace, do you want me to step in? I don't mind.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got the... Just to say, is it working? Yeah. Just really quickly, I won't take time away. I just wanted to add, just the previous question around kind of those concerns. Just to add to what Abbey said, I think an important thing to remember is standards is not like the yes or no. Yes, they're there to support, but it's a big part of the wider picture. So, really think about maybe, obviously I don't know the situation, but could it be the person behind that and who else has been involved? Because a huge part of standards is who's been involved in that process, and that might be the reflection of one individual. So I just wanted to add to that. But in terms of from my side, like the benefits of getting involved, I think for organisations, there's a huge amount. I mean, there's, the opportunity to have your say and really input in things that are making a difference. I think that's key. The career development skills is a huge thing, and I'm sure Ruth has probably got things to add to that. But there's a lot that standards can offer for young people. So I'll let Grace carry on. Carry on.
I couldn't quite hear the whole question, I think. So I'm just double checking that. How do we attract young people in organizations to get involved in the standard stuff in the organization? Am I about there?
Kind of. I would say is, what can businesses do to not enforce, but drive young talent into not just to join the business and offer the services, because the business will get a benefit from that. How can they offer young professionals to get them involved into standards making? It's more like a business perspective. We know that we want to engage young professionals in standards making, but how can business encourage young professionals into that world?
Yeah, it's not like immediately appealing, I think. Like being really honest, I think it's not always doesn't always sound that exciting or sexy. The thing that attracted me as a young person was career development, because I was like, cool, this is a thing. And actually I was involved in my last organization in an ISO standard on sustainability. And I was like, cool, I get to go and like talk to everyone in the organization and find out what they're doing and ask them how far they think that they're doing this thing. It helps me get across the whole organization, like meet everyone better. I'm in a kind of position of influence. I get to, this makes me sound extremely self-involved, but it was very career development led. And it was like such an opportunity to deepen my knowledge and understanding in a way that I just wouldn't have had otherwise. So that was really attractive to me. And then now I'm on the other side of like trying to lure, not in like, nefarious way, young people into standards. I think that would be the argument I would be inviting and making. And it's a cool opportunity to have a conversation and like also shape the future of the organization. It's pretty, I would say it's like, it elevates you. It makes you think more strategically, which is only going to serve you well in the future career. So that would be my big argument for getting involved.
Amazing. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Is there a mic? Yeah. Is there a mic near the front? We might have to use Ruth's mic, actually. Yeah. Nice.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I know we've talked a lot tonight about being a young person, bringing new ideas, doing the grunt work, and maybe using standards to get in the room. My question is, once you're in the room, how do you build the credibility for the senior leaders to trust you and give you the skills to lead and do that work?
Amazing question.
I think from an external perspective, given a lot of the work I've done has been working with organisations, not necessarily being an employee, I think confidence is a huge part of it. I'll be honest. I think when you're in these rooms and these settings, I think there's a level of, you wouldn't be in that room if you didn't have the skills to be there in the first place. So I think it's about building on that confidence and being bold. I think that's one thing I encourage a lot of young people, be bold, don't be scared. I think we have a culture here in the UK of not wanting to speak up. I think it's sort of reprogramming your mindset to be like, okay, cool, I'm in this room, they want my input, how can I sort of push that vision that I have? I think that's really it. I think the biggest one, I'd say confidence. Don't be afraid to speak up. And when the opportunity is there, challenge. Don't be afraid to challenge. I think if you're coming from the perspective that I'm thinking of from working with organisations, don't get me wrong, it can come across as tokenistic. They might just want that, but I think if you have the opportunity to say something, say it. You don't have nothing to lose, unless you are an employee, maybe. If you're very much doing consulting work, I think it's very much they want your opinions, capitalise on that opportunity.
I think that's such a good question. I feel like we could talk about that for so long, but I think that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. So thanks everyone for your great questions, and I'll now hand back over to Sarah to wrap things up. So please join me in thanking our panellists.
There were a few things that I took away from that. I think, Grace, what you said about young people caring, I think that's so true. And I think that drive and care to shape the future, not only that they're in, but generations to come, is something that not only organisations, but committees through standards development can really hone in on. And Melvin, just what you said around some of the challenges and say maybe some of the things with standards that we're not quite hitting the mark with. And I think you're right, the fact that these standards are so long and these documents are so heavy and they're just very difficult to interpret, not just for young people, but more widely as well. And I think there are some initiatives that we're working on through sort of making smart standards and digitalising that and trying to look at how we can make them more engaging for people and easier to understand. So those were some of my takeaways. But yes, thank you everyone for the session. And I just wanted to say as well, a big thank you to our bite-sized session hosts. So many of you may have had the chance to sort of have a look around, listen to some of those sessions and find out a little bit more about areas that you may not know of already. So thank you to all of our bite-sized session hosts, and if you join me in giving them a round of applause, that would be great. So that wraps everything up for this evening. I hope you found it engaging and inspiring. I know I have. It always is inspiring for me to see young people in the room. It was the same last year at the 2024 BSI Young Professionals Exchange, and I feel like we've really evolved the event and brought some new faces in, so it's been a pleasure to have you all here this evening. The event has been a huge team effort. A lot has gone on behind the scenes. So I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's made it possible. So that's our speakers and panellists, our bite-sized session leads, the wonderful Barbican venue staff, Louise and the team at Lemon Zest, as always, for their continued production support, and to our BSI staff and volunteers who have really helped shape this. And it's been great to see so many BSI employees who are young professionals involved in this event as well, just to show that we are committed to giving young people a voice, both externally and internally. And it goes without saying, from everyone at BSI, we thank you all for being here. It's a highlight for my year, this event in my career, and it just inspires me to think about what we can do next year for young people and really bring that community together. So thank you. Just a few little things to wrap up, because I'm very conscious of time. You'll know we've all got the digital badges. So for this evening's networking, you can basically tap with anyone, so that's how it works. You might have already been doing that this evening, and that's a way for you to carry on and connect with those individuals after. So if you just tap, it lights up, and then afterwards you'll be sent a link where you can access all those email addresses, and you can continue on that conversation and follow up on any connections you've made this evening. So I just wanted to highlight that. Again, we've got the feedback form for you to complete, so you can either scan that now, fill it in. I think there's a few QR codes outside as well, outside where the refreshments will be, and it will be sent to you after as well. So I encourage you to fill that in, because you know this event is designed by, with and for young people, and we want to make sure that what we're putting on and these conversations and the content in the bite-sized sessions and anything else we do is relevant to the audience that we're putting it on for. And again, just to remind you to join the YP network. And when I say YPs, I do mean young professionals, just for anyone that isn't aware of that. In terms of plans for 2026 with our YP engagement, it may look slightly different next year. We're in the planning stages at the moment and really thinking about what we can do, especially since our move to our new offices in Covent Garden in the Acre. So it's quite an exciting time for the planning of what we're doing, and hopefully we'll be seeing many of you a bit more frequently next year. One more thing on the badges, you'll all see that you've got a colour on the side. What I encourage you all to do is just find someone during the networking who has the same colour as you, and you may find that you have some similarities, or you might be from the same sector. So that's my kind of task for you for the networking. That's everything from me. Drinks will now be held in the garden room, and you'll also have the opportunity to browse the conservatory. So you've probably walked past it and seen it. For those of you that were here last year, I don't think you were able to go in there, but this year that's open, so I encourage you to go in there as well. And one last thing, we do have our headshot opportunity with our photographers, and that's in the garden room. So if you're unsure of where that is, please just ask any BSI colleagues. And if you do need any support with the networking and you'd like us to help you kickstart those conversations, please just come and talk to any of us at BSI, and we'll be happy to introduce you to anyone that you'd like to talk to. That's it from me. I'll shut up now and let you all go and have a drink and have some food and connect with each other. Thank you, everyone.